What's
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Together Thursdays. We are so excited that you've joined us this evening for our next edition of Together Thursdays, celebrating Black History Month, celebrating global leadership, and celebrating interfaith dialogue and community bridging. It's been a long time since we have had this conversation. But we thought to bring it back, and what better time this year to relaunch our Together Thursdays edition. We have some exciting guests that are going to be joining us tonight in conversation. Since the last time that we were together, we have a new staff member at Philos Black, none other than Wendell Shelby Wallace. Why don't you join me, Wendell?
Good evening. It's so good to be among family together. I would say at the table, but since it's a virtual gathering, I know that we're gathering together from across the country and across the world.
Around the world,
Black
absolutely.
is a global Black leadership network, and we have some of the brightest and the best in our network, and we have some bright and amazing friends that we've met along the way. And so really excited to be having tonight's conversation. Crystal, you ready to jump in?
I'm ready to hop in.
All right, let's bring on our guests. Let's go with Brandyn first. He's joining from across the world.
Bonjour.
Hey, Brandyn.
And bonjour.
We also have Pastor Carnela joining us as well.
Good evening, Pastor Carnela.
Good evening, everyone.
I am so excited.
I'm sorry. Do you all want to start by introducing yourselves and letting us know where you're joining us from?
Sure. I am Pastor Brandyn Pierce, pastor of the Place of Change Church. I'm excited to be joining you all from beautiful Cotonou, Benin Republic in West Africa.
Hello, my name is Pastor Carnela Hill. I am in the Raleigh-Durham area. The church is Be Restored Church in Wilson, North Carolina, and I'm also the founder of I Thrive Resource Center as well, and I'm excited to be with you tonight.
Awesome. Good to have you. Crystal, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us. Pastor Brandyn, Pastor Carnela, we are elated to have you on tonight and to have you on to talk about global leadership, to talk about some of the work that you are doing abroad. Our Philos Black leaders are working around the world. You both have upcoming trips. Pastor Carnela has an upcoming trip next month. I believe she's going to Kenya. And Pastor Brandyn is currently on location in Africa, on the continent, in the Republic of Benin. So we like to hear all about the work that you all are doing. It's so inspiring, and I really wanted to reach a larger audience just so that young people can see what's possible and that others can be inspired by the work that you're doing. It's not just about collecting passport stamps or even leisure travel, but I love how each of you are leading people in intercultural environments and sustaining cross-cultural relationships across the globe. So let's kick it off with you, Pastor Brandyn, as you are on location in the Republic of Benin. Why don't you just give us a little bit of background about the work that you do there?
So I kind of have a dual-sided role. I serve as the chairman of the Atlanta Cotonou Sister City Committee, which was an agreement established between the city of Atlanta and the city of Cotonou almost 30 years ago, specifically focusing around the areas of community development, cross-cultural exchange, and now with Mayor Andre Dickens's focus on youth programming. And so in my role as the chairman, I literally engage with the Beninese government, bringing different ideas and programming here to Cotonou, as well as bringing programming to the city of Atlanta, and then helping to bridge gaps between so that we begin to understand each other's culture and backgrounds. Equally, I also serve as the missions director for the Church of God in Christ here to the Republic of Benin, where I have the privilege of serving some 537 churches helping them with strategies for kingdom advancement. So areas of evangelism, discipleship, mission work, yeah, whatever you can think of. I'm helping those pastors and leaders to do those things, not so that we can bring the American way, but so that we can help them do what they do better.
Mm, mm. Absolutely. Amazing work, great work that you're doing, bridging um, or actually building bridges between Atlanta and between the US and the Republic of Benin. I love what you said. That you're not trying to do it the American way, but you are embracing other cultures and other traditions as you do your work. Why don't you talk to us about the significance of cultural humility to that end, and really just continuous learning and effective global leadership? How are you cultivating these qualities in your own leadership journey?
So one of the first things that I had to do when I started doing global work and global ministry is understand that one, I don't know it all. And number two, just because I'm from the United States doesn't mean I do it the best way. And so when I put my feet on the grounds in Africa, first in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and now in the Republic of Benin, I have intentionally put myself into the culture. And so I don't stay in fancy hotels. Most of the times I stay with the locals because I want to experience life from their perspective or their point of view. Interestingly enough, I'm very much a Christian, but when I first came to Benin to work, so Benin is the birthplace of Vundun, which we call voodoo in the United States.
Mhm, mhm,
And so it was asked of me the question, how are you as a Christian pastor, as a Christian leader, going to do this work knowing that this is the birthplace of Vundun? And I said to
mhm,
the people, well, help me understand it. Help me know. And they said, well, there are two sides to it. There's a cultural side and then there's a religious side. And I said, well, I'm not going to embrace the religious side, but if you teach me the cultural side, then we can navigate this. And they began
mhm,
to literally teach me and help me engage in the cultural side of London and just what it means to be a Benoit citizen. And so since that moment, like I've literally lived every time I visit the continent in this country in particular, I live like I live in Cotonou or I live in Parakou or I live
mhm,
in T'Challa.
mhm,
I have become a citizen of this country. Um, yeah, I'm home. And so, as we talk about cultural humility, it is to understand that what may work where you come from may not
mm,
necessarily work here. You have to dive yourself into this local country and this local culture and space if you're going to survive. Because other than that, you'll do something that may be normal to you back home, but you will offend the culture where you go, and then you'll find yourself being ejected from the country.
mm. Yeah, you have to be very careful when you're dealing with different cultures, different traditions, different political systems, and different styles of leadership and governance. I want to bring Carnela into the conversation to talk about Kenya. And Pastor Brandyn, don't go far. We're going to come back to you because I have some other questions to unpack. But Pastor Carnela, why don't you share with us a little bit about your upcoming trip to the motherland, to Kenya?
Yes, I am excited because this is my first time. I am actually going with a medical team, part of Women's Missionary Union. I went with them last year to Italy on missions and ministry work, and we spent time getting educated with refugees and learning more about the refugees in that area. And so when this opportunity came up with the same group, I said, okay, I looked at Peru, but that's not where God was calling me. He said Kenya. And I said, okay, God, we're doing this. And he said, yes. And so what I'm excited about is children, and anybody that knows me know that I have a heart for the kids. And so we
Mhm.
are going to the Mully's children's home, one of their places in Nairobi. And so I'm excited the team has been, most of them have been to this place several times, has been there. And so I will be the chaplain that will be going. The chaplain that usually goes, he's unable to go. But what I've been doing is preparing myself for the trip. Because most of the team are medical doctors, nurses, dentists, you name it. We are going in, and one of my things was, God, I know I'm going to see some emergency situations or some things that I've never seen before when you go with a medical team. And it is important for me to just say, God, prepare my heart. That is the biggest thing. I have a heart for missions work. I'm called to do missions work, but prepare my heart for what I'm going to see. And so I expect to see a lot, but I expect God to do what God does. And so speak to the previous chaplain tomorrow. We will spend some time to really prepare me, but I've been studying, and that's the important thing when you do missions work and you're going to another country. Study to show yourself approved, basically.
Absolutely. So is this your first trip to the continent or just your first trip to Kenya?
It's my first trip to the continent. It is my first trip. So I'm excited and nervous all in one breath, but I know it as well.
Well, I'm excited and nervous for you. Very, very, very excited. It is nothing like stepping foot on the continent of Africa. I pray that this journey is one that stretches you while you're there doing work. I know it's going to be a transformational encounter for you as well. What I want you to do is kind of take us through what your preparation looks like. Just because, like I said, I hope that your stories and the work that you both are doing really inspires other people, in particular, young leaders that are interested in global leadership, or young leaders that are interested in doing diplomacy work or foreign policy work or missions work or what have you. What does your preparation journey look like, Pastor Carnela?
For me, it's really learning about the culture there. Because some of the team has been before, is really having those conversations. What can I expect? What, my role as chaplain, also pastor, what can I do and what can I do? As Brandyn mentioned, I do dual things. And so I'm going to Madrid in May, and that's for advocacy work for women. So I have to switch hats and really dive into where I'm going. So it's studying where I'm going. I want to know everything I can in preparation for my trip. It is also praying. I have team, my bishop and the whole team is praying for me as I prepare for this work. My bishop has been to many nations. And so little things they tell me, I'm just taking the nuggets. This is different, like you said, because I'm going to the mother country. It's totally different than me going to Italy to do missions work. So I have to look at it in a different way. I'm a business person. I own a business. So of course my mind is automatically going to go to the business side. What can I pick up? So it's just a list of criteria that's important for me to pay attention to for the work that I'm doing this time, because typically when God sends me one place one time, I typically am going back again. And so I have to make sure that I pay attention to even the smallest things, because they become the big things.
Absolutely. And so for you and Pastor Brandyn, either one of you can answer. I was thinking about what you said about being a businesswoman and how you can apply that to the context of where you are. Pastor Brandyn, I believe you are as well, but how do you all incorporate principles of ethical leadership? I've heard about so much corruption that is happening around the world, here in the United States as well. And you both are pastors. You both are carriers of the gospel. That's your mission. How are you all incorporating ethical leadership and social responsibility into your work, especially as you're operating in these diverse cultural and socioeconomic contexts?
Well, I lead with oftentimes my faith.
Mhm.
I'm not going to waver on that. And so, as it relates to a lot of times dealing with even some of the pastors here, they'll say to me, "Well, Pastor, we got to do this, or we got to say this," and I'm like, "No, we're going to be honest. We're going to be truthful. And if we're not going to be honest and truthful, we're just not going to do it."
Mhm.
There have been several times working with local leaders here, working with governmental officials. That was another thing too. Uh, I came in as a pastor who worked in governmental spaces, and the first thing they said to me is that preachers don't work in government because all they do in government is lie. And
Right.
I said, well, they can say the same thing about people in church. All we do is lie too. But somebody has to present the standard, and somebody has to show them the difference. And so I lead with that. I lead with the fact that I live an honest and truthful life. I live with the fact that I'm going to do what is right always because it's right to do right. I live with the fact that my integrity is not what I'm going to do in front of you, but when you're not watching me. And because
Mhm.
I've lived that way, and keep that at the forefront of who I am as a person in all my dealings, it's helped to change some things here. When I first
Mhm.
talking about travel, when I first started going to Africa, I started in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Corruption
Mhm.
everywhere, and what helped
Mhm.
us sometimes was just wearing our collar. We had to wear the collar. We started going there in the middle of COVID, and so they had all these COVID laws that said if you were out after a certain time,
Okay.
you had to pay a COVID tax. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a missionary, just got off this plane. The plane got in late. You're not about to charge me every 30 seconds. So you see the
Mhm.
collar, we just trying to get to the hotel, get some sleep. What that also
Yeah.
did is it made them focus on our actions and our behaviors. They didn't see us drinking. They didn't see us smoking. They didn't see us cussing. They didn't see us doing those things because they saw us as a man of God, men and women of God, and they respected that. So,
Mm.
and even now, I don't wear the collar when I come here because I don't have to. They know that if I say yes, it's gonna be yes, and if I say no, it's gonna be no.
And for those that don't know, when he refers to the collar, the clergy collar, is what he is referring to. So, Pastor Carnela, for young people that are listening and that aspire to work internationally and really just make a positive difference in global communities, what advice would you give them?
Sure. The first thing is search your heart, sit with God, ask Him. He'll tell you where He's sending you. And you may not get all the details initially, but you will know your assignment. And sometimes it's starting local. I remember when I went to one of my first mission trips, the person's I was doing fundraising and they said, why not local? I do local work. Everybody don't know that I do local work and it's not for the masses.
Mhm.
And so do the local work and then let God enlarge your territory and take you to the next place. So if you're serving at home first, you're serving in your community first, you're serving in the government first, politics, whatever it is He's called you to do, then start at home. I mean, the Bible tells us start at home first. So if we start at home first, when we get ready to go to other places, y'all know I was about to go in there and I had to catch myself. Sorry. If we start at home first, then when we get ready to go to nations and countries and wherever He send us, we're prepared. And Crystal, you know my story. You know, when we went to Israel the first time, it was God said, prepare, Carnela.
Mm.
Prepare,
Mhm.
meaning even the simple things. You got your passport ready. That's a simple thing. How are you going to respond in another country? Sometimes we have to be quiet.
Mm.
And a lot of the work globally for me started when I was in the corporate world because I had to do corporate work in other countries and I didn't know the language well, but they
Mhm.
sent me and said, show up and we're going to have some people with you.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
start that way.
Thank you, Pastor Carnela. Thank you, Pastor Brandyn, so much. You guys hang tight. We have another segment, but I'm sure there will be lots more questions for you all to unpack. Once we come back at the end from our audience, I have a couple more questions for us to ask, but I'm going to bring Wendell to take us into our next segment.
So excited. Again, that was that segment with Pastor Carnela and Pastor B. That was really inspiring, especially for those who are looking to do more global leadership work, and especially hearing from you, Pastor Carnela, on what it takes to be a global leader. I'm going to bring on a very special guest. She's a friend who's near and dear to the Philos Project, the work that we do at the Philos Project, specifically with Philos Black, and it's none other than Dillard University President Dr. Rochelle Ford. Dr. Ford, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. It's not a surprise to see that you're sitting in your office doing work as always.
Hey, you know what? It's a calling, and when you feel called to serve and help to cultivate leaders, you get energized no what time of night or day. So I appreciate the opportunity to be in community and for both of you walking alongside of Dillard University as we continue to cultivate leaders who live ethically, think and communicate precisely, and act courageously to make the world a better place.
Listen,
thank you, Dr. Ford.
Thank you for sharing with us in a special time out here in Louisiana. As you all know, Philos Black is located in we base ourselves in Atlanta, Georgia, but we're all over the world. So, Dr. Ford, you're joining us during a special time out there in New Orleans. It's carnival time in the city of New Orleans. How are you enjoying your first carnival season?
I'm enjoying it and immensely. That's why I'm wearing purple today. And these are not beads; these are actually pearls. But there probably are some beads hanging around my office.
So I hear the Dillard mission statement. Crystal and I have had the opportunity to visit on the campus for multiple programs, and really enjoyed your inauguration. Again, a little tribute to Mardi Gras. I think my favorite part was seeing the Zulu folks at the end of your inauguration celebration. But you all recite the mission statement. You're a very mission-oriented institution. And the end portion of your mission statement, you talk about acting courageously to make the world a better place. What does that look like for you?
Wow. So making the world a better place is making sure that you leave opportunities behind for others that are better than what you have had yourselves. How do you make this world better than the way that you found it? And that doesn't mean sitting on the sidelines. That means having the courage to act. Sometimes acting means interrupting biases. Sometimes acting means to show love when other people are showing hate. Sometimes acting courageously means showing humility when you want to walk in pride. I know everything. Acting courageously means sometimes tweeting, sometimes marching, sometimes holding back and being restrained.
Yeah. And I want to talk about a courageous act that you took in the early days of your presidency, and that was reestablishing the National Center for Black-Jewish Relations at Dillard University, and I mean, we're proud partners of the center. What led to your idea of reestablishing the center, and really what motivated it? What drove you to do it?
Sure. So Dillard University actually established a center, our National Center for Black-Jewish Relations, in the 1980s. And it was established by our president at that time, Samuel Du Bois Cook. And Dr. Cook was actually a good friend of Dr. King. They both were Morehouse men. That might make you smile. I didn't even know that there was a symbol to Morehouse. I guess that is the tip of the house.
House.
The house. Okay. Thank you. Had not I don't recall ever seeing that. But so he was a Morehouse grad, classmate of Dr. King, and he went on to Ohio State to get his doctorate, and actually was mentored by a Jewish American scholar there. And he was like, there's a lot more in common between us than what you might think. And he was like, you're from Ohio from the north. I am Black from the south. There is nothing we have in common. And he started sharing the story about how African Americans had even helped to liberate, Jewish people during the Holocaust from the imprisonment, the concentration camps, and then, as the civil rights movement wore on, it was Jewish and Black people walking side by side, and helping to desegregate America. Dr. Cook went on to become the first African American to be a tenured track faculty member at a predominantly white institution in the South. That's like a big deal at Duke University. And one of the things he was very passionate during those times in the 60s and civil rights movement was having greater understandings of each other and of people, and really appreciating the friendship that had been developed between he and some of the other Jewish leaders. But when he became president at Dillard, it's very much so like the time that we're experiencing today, where the Black community and the Jewish communities have really grown apart. Affirmative action, EEOC, people were asking, why haven't Black people gotten along? Why do you need this sort of action? And he and others were having to articulate that. But at the same time, you have the rise of Minister Farrakhan, and even Jesse Jackson, was saying things in his own presidential campaign that some would view as anti-Semitic, right? And there was a becoming talking past each other. And that unity, the help that each other had, was becoming an hindrance. So he started hosting at Dillard University through the National Center, national conferences, and actually published an edited book that was about those conference papers and how we need to remember that shared history. So when I came to Dillard, but unfortunately, the center closed in the early 2000s, 90s, 2000s, and the university went through a whole rebuilding stage after Katrina. So when I became the 8th president back in 2022, and I lived through the pandemic, I lived through the mass shooting at Temple Emmanuel, right? Mother Emmanuel, the AME church. And I lived through and saw the same hate being spewed at Jewish people and Black people, because people were just straight up racist and full of hate. And there was a mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. And it was that same sort of manifesto of hate that was perpetrating. And if you listen to some of our music and you listen to some of our leaders and the rhetoric that was coming across, we as African Americans were spreading misinformation, and Jewish people were not understanding Black Lives Matter. And it's like, yeah, all lives, yeah, but our house is on fire. Don't say all lives, right? And so I felt that, but at the same time, I was learning the history of Dillard and learned about the center. I'm like, oh my gosh, why do we shut this? We need to reopen it. The time is now. So this is back in 2022. And it was you, my brother, who hosted and started talking to me. In fact, we hosted the Philos Black reunion at Dillard that fall, and when telling me about the trip to Israel and the impact that it had made on so many individuals to understand their own faith tradition grounded in Christianity, but understanding the Holy Land, which is still the Holy Land of the Jewish people, and it's the Holy Land for us as Christians, is actually Holy Land for Muslims too. So for Black people, there's a whole host of significance in that area. But then I started learning the history of Dillard, which was founded in 1869 as two other institutions, Straight College and New Orleans College, right? And just like we're finding ourselves in 2023 in higher ed, during the Great Depressions, those two schools were about to close. But the philanthropic support of the Jewish American community in the urging that when those two universities would merge together to form Dillard University, it was actually a Jewish American woman that said, Dillard University has to have a Black president. So if you look at our buildings around campus, you see Stern Hall, Rosenwald Hall, Camphor Hall, you see the Rosa Keller Avenue of the Oaks. All of these are Jewish American individuals, but our students didn't know about the shared history. We heard the anti-Semitic things, in music. We hear the questions that the Jewish community has about our communities, but we also see the joint hate. And I said, we need to bring people together. And because of you, in our conversations in the dinner that we had just before MLK Day, I said, we are going to rebirth this center. And we did.
Yeah,
so I'm hoping now that we will fill that void to help encourage more love, help encourage more humility, some more understanding, just like, the brothers and sister, pastors who were on earlier. How do we lean in and learn about each other so that we can create spaces where real dialogue and conversations can happen so that you can learn about other people, particularly Black people, learning about Jewish people, and Jewish people learning about the diversity within Black people as there is diversity among Jewish people.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the work that we've done with the center thus far is as you mentioned, exploring the diversity of the Jewish community, and even highlighting the Black Jews that that are here in the United States and across the world.
Multi-generationally Black that can trace their roots all the way back.
Yes. I mean, like I remember, we just had Dr. Eves at Dillard University last week.
And
even
professor. Mm-hmm.
Yep, and even going into the conversations about bringing in Black Jewish professors into the institution. I mean, I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. Most recently, you were talking about acting courageously. You spoke at a rally out in DC about the in response to the attacks of October 7th and fighting against terrorism. What motivated you to act such courageously? I will note that you were literally the only HBCU president that we saw acting so courageously, boldly on the stage in front of folks. I just want you to talk about what motivated you to do that, and then the response that you got. Be it positive response, negative response. Hear a little bit more about that experience.
Sure. So when we established the Center for Black Jewish Relations, the idea was to be able to bring the communities together to support each other to end hate. And although the march was labeled March for Israel, but it also was to end anti-Semitism. And it also was a call to bring hostages home. So regardless of politics, the Jewish people were afraid. The Jewish people felt like they had to hide their Star of David while they were walking the streets of America. In the same way that people who were from Palestine or considered them Palestinians, right, didn't want to wear things that represented their people because of the hate that was spewing in America. And because we said that we were going to be the national center of Black Jewish relations, I felt compelled that when a people group are hurting, that we show them love and support, and that we join together to end hate. Because hate in any form is going to cause further disruption to the democracy that we have. And so when I spoke at the march, I first shared the story of how we were beginning to build our advisory board. And this is way before the terrorist attack. And had set up a call to meet with the president of Yeshiva. And like presidents, we're a little busy at times. That's why we're still in our offices at night. But he and I kept playing phone tag. And we finally scheduled a date, and happened to be the date that he returned from Israel after the Hamas terrorist attack.
Wow.
And he was heartbroken. And he's like, my students are afraid, Dr. Ford. I'm afraid. My son has decided that he will, stay in Israel and fight, for our country's dual citizenship. And he's like, I'm afraid. And I don't know what to do. And I said, you know what? Moses was a leader. You're a president, just like Moses was a leader. Moses didn't do it alone. He had Aaron, he had Hur. What did they do? They held Moses' arms up. Moses was given help to lead.
Preach, Dr. Ford.
Let me be your Aaron and Hur. And it touched him. And that's what I said back to the crowd. We see you. You are in pain, but we are going to be here to be in community with you. But I also said, let's pause for recognizing all of the lives that have been lost in this war. The Palestinian lives, the Jewish lives that have been lost in the war. But then we said, let's now join hands and not lean into hate for others, but lean into love, lean into understanding. Let's join hands to end anti-Semitism. Let's join hands to end racism. Let's join hands to end anti-Palestinian hate. Let's join hands to end Islamophobia. And how do we lean into love and into humility so we can join hands to end hate and to bring those hostages home? And so it was an act of courage, but it was also a call for all of us to work together. And that's what the center is all about. And your question of what was the positive response, what was the negative response? Well, unfortunately, one of the things that happens in our society, I call them sound bites, but we go on social media and we see a picture and we see whatever that person tweets or puts on the Instagram to describe what is in that picture. So they held up a picture of the march. And then instead of listening to the speech, instead of reading the remarks of the speech, people said, how much did they pay you to do that speech? Not knowing that I was speaking about love. I was speaking about ending racism and ending anti-Palestinian hate as much as I was saying ending anti-Semitism. And nowhere did I approve or condone the actions of the politics of Israel's response. I said, let's lean into love in this country. And so at the same time, the outpouring of love, of saying thank you for being there, being bold and acting courageously, because once people read or listened to the speech, people were like, oh, that's right. You. Because you can't argue with love. God has called us to love. And the beautiful thing is that from that, when I walked off the stage, one of our alums of Dillard University was standing there. And he said, Dr. Ford, I had to wait till after you spoke because I went to Dillard, I served in the military, I helped in the Hurricane Katrina relief, and I am a Black Jewish person. And it means so much that a Black woman, my alma mater, was up there speaking about love and ending hate. And then from that, amazing individuals came out and said, how can we support this effort? But even before that, we had amazing individuals like you believing in this. We had individuals like our co-chairs, one of our co-chairs, Warren Bell, who is an amazing leader here in New Orleans who worked at Dillard University alongside Dr. Cook and birthed this center. And Warren Bell, before the attack, he called and said, I heard about this. How do I get involved? Let me help. And others joined us, like Arnie Falco, who is also is a Jewish American here in New Orleans, who led the local New Orleans Jewish Federation. And he said, how can we help? And he helped to build multicultural outreach after our center closed. And so these two amazing, distinguished leaders are working alongside this Gen Xer, right, to make a difference and act courageously.
Dr. Ford, I do want to highlight something that you said, and because this is something that we often deal with in the space that we work in at Philos Black. It's no secret we're Black. We're in a space that that is a very diverse space. You know, we're not a monolithic organization, just like Black people are not a monolithic people. I will say, I proudly say, Crystal proudly states it. We said it as a statement from Philos Black. We're pro-Israel. We're pro-Palestine. We're pro-justice, and we're pro-peace. And so, those are things that I think that saying things like terrorism should not exist. Saying things like Israelis and Jews have the right to live in peace. Saying things like Palestinians have the right to live in peace. Saying things like we ought to love a little bit more and hate a lot less.
Yes.
Those are all things that we can agree on. And so I am most appreciative. Crystal and I both were present for your speech in Washington, D.C. We in fact, there were Dillard University students who were with Philos Black at the rally, and with our partner organization pastors at the rally. And it was refreshing to hear you speak. I just wish that we all would do a better job of listening, because if we can listen, then we can figure out how to better courageously act. Right? The act of acting starts with actively listening. And while we have Chairman Bell on, I want to hear from you, Chairman Bell. What in the world made you decide to get re-involved with all of this years and years after Dr. Cook's presidency?
Dillard University, first of all, was the first of multiple assignments I had in higher ed. I started teaching there in 1983. Interestingly enough, I got married at the Dillard Chapel, and at the time, I needed someone to officiate, and I had not yet had my previous situation annulled. So Dr. Samuel Du Bois Cook was a deacon, and we had met each other, and I asked, and he said, yeah. So I got married at the chapel by him. More importantly, within that first year of teaching there, because he asked me to use my skills in TV news to help them start their mass comm program, but he then invited me to join the National Center for Black-Jewish Relations. And, Wendell, I've shared this story with you, but as a very young Black man attending schools up north at a fairly early pace, because my high school sent us out even when we were underclassmen in high school, the only students I ever remember who were welcoming to us and empathetic towards us because they got it were the Jewish students. I'll never forget being, I think, 16 or 17 years old, and my roommate at the prep school I was attending a summer program at invited me to New York. And it's the first time in my life I ever tasted a bagel, but just as important, I saw the classic stereotypical Jewish mom watching the news with a cigarette out of her mouth and her bagel and her coffee. I wasn't ready for lox yet, but I got there too eventually, and I love capers. But it was important for me during those years while being a part of the faculty to also be part of that community that Dr. Cook established. And I really mean that. I miss some of the people who've gone on since then. But as soon as this came up, I reached out to one of my contemporaries, then Rabbi Ed Cohn, who is an emeritus rabbi now at one of the temples. But I said, am I crazy? Us old goats sometimes have to prove we still got a little something. And all of a sudden, I've got some other nonprofit involvements, and I've got a documentary coming out. But I need to do this because in my heart, I know we've got to get back to some places and spaces. And I don't want to say much more because we have that eloquent Gen X president. I have to remind myself she's amazing. Oh, that's right. She's the age of my firstborn child. Oh, my God. But I'm still here, and I'm still here for you guys. And whatever Philos needs as well, especially on the Black hand side, I'm here. Trust me, I got memories, and I know where people always understood where I was, okay? Because they felt equally what it was like to be the victims of centuries of persecution, of hatred that we didn't deserve. And that's really all I have to say, except I am here for you. And Madam Prez, we're waiting for our next orders.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman Bell. And to that point, I'm going to go ahead and bring everyone else back on. We are focusing this month, Black History Month, on faithful friends. That is our theme for the month. And that is it's indicative of who we are as an organization. Of course, our organization, the Philos Project, the word Philos is a Greek word for friends. And we represent that in all that we do. Philos Black focusing on three things: Israel, Africa, and Black America. And so we've made friends in all those places, and our leaders are making friends in all those places. And so throughout the month on social media and in our programming, that is what we're focusing on, those friendships. So it's a great opportunity for us all to come together and just have a good little roundtable discussion, if you will. I'll turn it back over to our amazing director, Crystal Bracey.
So Chairman Bell and Dr. Ford, I was so inspired by your conversations and just listening to the rich history of Dillard, how it got started. I tell you, sometimes there's just so much history that you just don't know about a place as many times as you visited, but it's really important to have context and have that background. As you were talking, Dr. Ford, I really honed in on love, not just because this is the month of love and Valentine's Day or whatnot. But as Christians, we are called to love. I came across a quote very recently that said that love is not a feeling. Love is as love does. Love is action. It is conscious striving for the beloved. It is willful thoughtfulness, properly planned and executed. And I thought about the pandemic, how there were many teachable moments. We learned that we need to rest more. A lot of us are workaholics. We work many hours a day. The pandemic called us all to Sabbath. It called us to spend more time with our families. We were neglecting just familial responsibilities. It taught us things like we can work from home. We can do a lot of things virtually that we were spending time to do in person. Lots of teachable moments. Tying in the theme of love into what we've been talking about all evening long. What does this moment in history call for?
And when you say this moment, just what's happening around the world, right? I look at what's happening in Tigray. I look at what's happening in Israel. I look at what's happening in Nigeria with the Christian community there. Black is a global thing, right? Black is not isolated to the United States of America. Black is a global thing. Crystal's question, I'm like, how do we courageously act in this moment? What are we called to do in this moment? How do we love in this moment?
So Crystal, one of the things that you said, love is an action. And I don't remember if you or Wendell said this, but we've got 2 ears, we got one mouth. And the Bible says that this one thing inside of our mouth is one of the strongest organs in our body. It can be used to edify and it can be used to tear down. But if we start listening and learning from each other, the moment is calling us to pause and to listen, because we don't really understand each other. My brother and sister pastors were talking about as they were preparing themselves to go back to Mother Africa, to different parts of the continent. They had to humble themselves and listen and understand the culture to be able to enter into that space and be of any good, of any service, and to recognize that we don't know it all. Mm-hmm. That our perceptions of what we might think Kenya might be like might be very different than what Kenya is like. And Kenya is very different than the Benin. You know what I mean? Like, I went to the Gambia to do my Fulbright, and I went over to Kenya to do missions work and to do missions to single parents, particularly single mothers. That's a whole other story. But to prepare to enter in those spaces, you have to humble yourself, even what it means to be Black. Mm-hmm. Because when I went to Kenya, now I'm all excited because I am very proud to be an African-American woman. I am Black. I am proud. I am here, right? Roots of slavery. I, in fact, I just trace my ancestors back to the mother, one of the mothers of gynecology in Arca, who was operated on as a slave. That's like my ancestor, right? Okay. So I'm preparing now to go. I'm all excited. I'm Black. I'm proud. All of that. I get there like Mizugu, Mizugu, Mizugu. I'm like, what? They're like visitor. And I was like, no, they're not saying visitor. They're saying American. So then the pastor who I'm with, who is Kenyan, he's like, let me show you Dr. Ford. I'm like, please don't embarrass me. In front of the whole church, he says, is Dr. Ford white or is Dr. Ford Black African? Universally, the church said in unison, she's white. Like, no,
Wow.
look at my natural hair.
Wow.
And I was crushed. So my whole perception of self was being challenged. Their perception of me, I was more American, I'm more fair skinned, and my Europeanness of my heritage, not by desire, but by force, came through. And it was a humbling of myself among African people. It's been a humbling of myself to know that there are Black Jewish people who can trace their heritage back to Ethiopian Jewish people. I've had to humble myself. You know, how many Jewish Americans actually attend Yeshiva University and Brandeis University because they're exploring their Blackness and their Jewishness the same way that my students who are African American and biracial are exploring their Blackness at Dillard. That's all I got to say.
Very, very powerful. Let me say this. Where should we send our offer to, Dr. Ford? Because you have been preaching tonight.
I repeat that, www.dillard.edu.
Somebody type that in the chat, because listen, we got pastors, preachers on this lot. Dr. Ford, you have been dropping gems all night, and for everyone on the line, for chairman, for our two pastors, Pastor Carnela, Pastor Brandyn. This is a great centering moment as we're preparing to bring this to a close. She talks about a humbling of self. And Wendell and I were talking just a couple of days ago about how it's not coincidental that Valentine's Day this year falls on the first day of Lent, as we are moving into this season of self-denial, as we're moving into this season of sacrificial love, right? As we're moving into this season, what does this? We're talking about what the moment calls for, but we're also talking about humbling of ourselves as we're getting ready to serve, as you're getting ready to go to Kenya, as you're already in the Republic of Benin. Pastors, talk to us a little bit about that idea of humility.
Pastor Carnela.
That was so humble of you, Brandyn. That was very humble. I see how you were putting the ability into action.
That denying of yourself, knowing that your work and your mission is greater than you, loving thy neighbor, even though your neighbor doesn't look like you. Will you love thy neighbor greater than thyself? And seek God when your neighbor gets on your last nerve.
Amen.
Will you be open and willing to allow God to do what he wants you to do, to be a blessing to that neighbor, regardless of how that neighbor feels about you? Will you be open enough to receive it? That's humility, and that's love.
Now, where do we send your offer to?
Listen,
Pastor
these women are here preaching tonight. Don't let anybody tell you that women aren't amazing preachers. The best women I've heard preach have been tonight on this Together Thursday's conversation. Brother Pastor.
Humility. Wow.
Take us home, Pastor.
Humility and love. I think it is, especially in the context of what we're saying, it is It is the ability to keep on going, even when you know that you're being taken advantage of, when you know that you're being lied to, when you know that you're being stabbed in the back, because you understand the call, you keep going. Because at the end of the day, it is the love that you have first for God, and for the work that you do. You know, as a missionary on the field, we experience a lot. We experience a lot of being taken advantage of because people know we don't understand the language, or we don't necessarily understand the culture, or as my first time, we don't necessarily understand the way that the money works. And so, you know, we trust that the people that we're there to serve will do right by us.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen.
Not guaranteed.
But it is the love of God that compels us to continue to serve over and over and over again. And when you think about it from the context of Christ in this month of love, he keeps loving us even when we don't do the things that we're supposed to do, when we don't love
That's
our
good.
neighbors as ourselves, when we
That's
don't,
good.
when we aren't always as truthful as we should be, when we not, you know, he just keeps on loving us in spite of. And so it is because of the love that he displayed for us that keeps us walking in humility, to continue to fulfill the assignment and call on our life.
That's good. That's really good. Brandyn, you actually remind me. I have two rabbis, and you know I'm a Christian, but I have two rabbis. One is Rabbi Sandra Lawson, who's also Dr. Ford's rabbi. We will fight over her later. We share her though. I follow Rabbi Lawson faithfully. And the other is a dear friend of mine, Rabbi Larry Cernowitz. And I remember being in Georgia right after another tragic killing of another Black man. And Rabbi Cernowitz got up and spoke, and he talked about some of the greatest commandments, right? The greatest commandment, loving God, right? Then to love thy neighbor as thyself. But then he talked about the one that we struggle with. That is to love the stranger that we've never seen before, right? The stranger who we've never met. And he went on to explain that it's easy to love our neighbors because our neighbors are typically like us, right? Our neighbors they make the same amount of money that we make. Typically, we work in the same place. I think about my neighbors in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We all were state employees. We were all Black middle class. Like, we all drove similar cars. We understood each other, but it was really hard to understand the stranger, right? It's really hard to embrace the stranger. That's a commandment, truthfully, and vulnerably. That's the one that I even struggle with daily. But when I remind myself of God's love towards me, the hard-headed individual, the stubborn individual, the one who wants to do things his way, I'm reminded of how much easier it should be for me to love the stranger, the one that Jesus says are of another fold that I'm unaware of, right? So it reminds me, the American, the Black American who's grown up in South Louisiana, that I should love both the Jew that's living in Israel as much as I should love the Palestinian living in Palestine, as much as I should love the Nigerian living in Nigeria, as much as I should love those folks who show up at my door here in America, right? And that is a courageous decision that we have to make each and every single day. And to answer your question, Crystal, the act of love requires humility. I can't love without being humble, because if I'm puffed up and think that I have it right and that my way is the right way, then I don't allow myself the opportunity to love, embrace, and learn from other people, right? I can't embrace my Jewish brothers and sisters and my Palestinian brothers and sisters without my Muslim brothers and sisters without being humble, without humbling myself to know that I'm not Mr. Perfect.
Yeah. Wow, Chairman Bell, you're not off the hook. But this conversation has been rich. The moment calls for love. The moment calls for a humbling of self. The moment calls for service. Africa, Israel, Black America, the uttermost parts of the earth. Chairman Bell.
I have no more to say. Seriously, this has been really full because I said, wow, when Dr. Ford stopped. And then I said, these preachers are going to have to come with it. And they have been rich. I don't presume to have any further to add. I came as an observer and I knew I needed to introduce myself. I'll try to come with it a little stronger next time, guys. But I've been looking over because I've got a 2-year-old grandson here and I'm just stunned he hasn't interrupted us so far. But I need to hear him call me Papa, frankly. So I'm ready to say goodnight.
Well, we appreciate you being here with us, Chairman Bell, and we appreciate you being here.
Madam Prez.
Exactly.
Will you be at a certain ball tomorrow night?
Oh, they say the ball is tomorrow.
Well, now there's a Zulu ball, and then there's the bougie ball I'll be attending as a guest of someone. Are you going to the bunch ball by any chance, or the Zulu ball?
We will have a conversation about all of that offline.
I knew what she was going to say before she said it. I want to go to a ball, though. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's the only one I do every year because I'm not into all that stuff, but I'm just old. What can I say?
Well, Crystal, I think that you hit on something that's very important for our network and our friends who are tuning in. This month is probably one of the most special Februarys that I've experienced as long as I've been alive. And I know that it's occurred probably before in history, but it's a special moment in history. We're marking Black History Month, right? Mm-hmm. We're marking Mardi Gras, which is my favorite holiday. I tell you, if you're from Louisiana, there's Christmas and then there's Mardi Gras. Christmas you celebrate with your individual families. Mardi Gras, everybody's family is celebrating with the family. So it's Mardi Gras, and we're also beginning Lenten season, which is going to ease us into Women's History Month, which I'm also excited about. I hope that all of you will tune in for us through our fasting season. As we partner up with Philos Catholic and the Philos Action League on a Lenten fast that focuses on 6 wonderful Black Catholic saints and figures. 2 of them are men, 4 of them are women. I'm so excited to learn more about them. And another shameless plug, one of them has a connection to the city of New Orleans. And so excited to be celebrating all of that throughout the month of February. But I want y'all to know one thing. We are Black 365, especially in this leap year. And so don't think that you're getting away with learning about Black history and learning about the work that we're doing isolated to February. We're going to be doing it all year
long. That's right.
On Thursdays, once a month, here at Philos Black.
Yes, absolutely. It's been wonderful having you all. Chairman Bell, thank you for joining us. Pastor Carnela Hill, thank you for joining us. Pastor Brandyn Pierce, thank you for joining us. And Dr. Rochelle Ford, we appreciate all of you for spending the evening with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Bless you.
Bye-bye.